Hello everyone. In this tutorial we're going to be looking at some advanced things that we'll be able to do with the slider tool, which is my favorite tool. So let's start off. I'm going to create a slider. And I'm just going to call it, we'll just call it A, that's fine. And we'll set the minimum at 0 and the maximum at 15. We'll just leave the increment at 0.1 for now. Click apply. Alright, so you should know what a slider does if you watch my basic slider tutorial. So now I'm going to create a point, and its position is going to be dependent on this slider. So I'm going to go down to my input bar, and I'm going to create a point, capital A, make sure it's capital, is equal to the x coordinate is going to be A, which is our slider variable, and then the y coordinate is just going to be 0. And then I'm going to hit enter. And so now I have a brand new point that its x coordinate is dependent on the slider that I just created. So if you notice, it moves back and forth. And so we'll make this point a little bit more noticeable. Make it big and red. Alright. So now one of the things that the slider does is it can be animated. And so if we look at, well, let me just show you what the animation does. So I'm just going to click animation on. I right click the slider, animation on. And so what it does is it just makes the slider slowly go through all of its values. And so you can show many things with animations. So right now the slider is just going to go back and forth until I tell it to stop. I can do that in two ways. I can just right click and then animation on again to uncheck it. Or, let's turn it back on, there's a little pause button down here, and that'll also shut it off. So if you notice, it was almost kind of choppy as it moved from left to right, and I can actually change that by going into my sliders properties and then changing the increment. It's counting by tenths, but I want to count more often than that. I'm going to count by thousandths, and this is going to make it a lot smoother as it moves to the right. The second thing that you probably noticed was that as soon as it reached the max, it turned around and went back the other way. We can change that as well under the animation properties. The repeat button, so it was set to oscillate, so it's just going to go left to right and then back from right to the left, and it's going to repeat that. So we can set it so it just increases, and once it hits the max it starts over and keeps going, or we can set it to decrease, and again once it's the min it'll start over again. The one that I find that I use a lot is the increasing once. And what this is going to do is when the slider hits its maximum, it's just going to stop. So I'm going to set it to increasing once. You can also change how fast the slider animates here with the speed. So the default is 1, and you saw how fast that was. I'm going to change it to, say, 4, so we can just kind of see how fast it is. Alright, so I'm going to push the play button and see how it's a lot smoother. And again, it stopped at the top. Which is, it's helpful for many applications the slider has. So now, the interesting thing is that I can make the speed dependent on another variable or even another slider. So let's look at how to make this point, instead of moving at a constant speed, I want it to accelerate. So I'm going to create a new slider. Then we'll just call it B. We'll set the minimum to 0 and the max to 5 is fine. And we'll leave the increment at 0.1. Alright, so I'm going to go to animation. I'm going to leave the speed at 1, but I'm going to change this one also to increasing once. And then click apply. And now I'm going to go back into the properties. Make sure you select the move tool. I'm going to go back into the properties for slider A. And I'm going to change the speed to B, which is our other slider. And so now if I turn the animation for A on, I can make it go slower by changing B, or I can speed it up. Whatever you want to do. But if I don't want to physically have to accelerate it by moving the slider B, I can turn the animation for B on as well. It's going to be kind of tricky to turn the animation for both of them on at once, so I'm going to use a button for this. So this will be just a quick intro to how to use buttons for animation. So I'm going to grab a button under the same drop down as the slider. We'll just put it right here. And I'm just going to call it animate. This is just the text that shows up on the button. So the script that GeoGebra uses to turn animation on is start animation. And it's important that the S and the A are capitalized. And then use a left square bracket. And if you notice, the red squiggly went away so that you know it's a recognized or reserved text. And I'm going to turn on the animation for slider A and then a comma, and also the animation for slider B, and then the right bracket. And then I'm just going to click apply. And I'm going to make another button that's going to stop the animation. So I'm going to grab another button. I'm going to call it stop. And then the same script, start animation, is going to be used, but instead I'm just going to type in false. And what this will do is it will just stop all of the animation. And then I'm going to click apply there. So now if I click animate, you're going to notice both the sliders are going to be animated, and because A's speed is dependent on B and B is increasing, we created an acceleration. Alright, so now I'm going to create a reset button. So I'm going to create a new button, and we're going to call it reset. And what this is going to do is, first I'm going to stop the animation again. So I want to stop by just typing in false. We'll stop all animation. And then I want to set A back to 0, and I also want to set B back to 0. And then click apply. So if I click reset, it's going to start it back over. If I click animate, again we'll have our acceleration. I can stop it if I want. I can change the value of B, start the animation again, reset. So I can create these really cool animations just using sliders. So something else that would be cool is that if I want to change how fast it accelerates, I can create even another slider. We'll just call it C. We'll actually see what happens. We'll leave a negative values in there, an increment of 0.1. And then I'm going to go back into the object properties for B. And I'm going to change the speed for B. I'm going to set that to our new slider, C. And so this one, I'm not going to animate this one. This is just going to be one that the user can change to whatever they want. So let's say that I want the acceleration to be really fast. All I have to do is increase the slider of C up. So the default before was just 1. So if I set C to 1, it will accelerate at the same rate it did before. But say I want it to go faster. So I'm going to reset this. If you notice, the buttons sometimes don't work if you click. So I go to the object properties for the buttons, and I fix object on them. And that way when you click on it, it doesn't move around, which is pretty helpful. So now if I animate it, same speed. But now I want to set it so it accelerates faster. I'm going to make C, we'll just max it, put it at 5. So if I animate, it's accelerating a lot faster. And then B hits its max. But as you can see, you can create all of these slider interactions to make really cool, great, just GeoGebra, pretty much anything, just any modeling of a real-life situation. You know, you have a race or something and you want to create a ball falling off a cliff. You can look at the acceleration with that. Many cool things. One more thing that we can do that's pretty cool is we can use the speed property of the slider, and we can create if statements. And the reason that we would want to do that is maybe we want to start an animation, but we don't want another animation to start until a certain point. So let's say that I'm going to create another point. Actually, I'm going to create another slider first. So this one will be D, and we'll set it minimum to 0 and the max to 15 again, and we'll count by thousandths we'll set the animation to increasing once, and then we'll just set the speed to 4. So I'm going to create a new point. Capital B is going to be equal to our new parameter D, our slider we just made, and we'll just set it at -1, just so you can see it's below the red point. So I'm going to change it so it's blue. Whoops. Grab my point, make it blue, and we'll make it big. So again, it's dependent on that. So now, let's say that I want D to start animating, but only once this red point is past 10. So I can go under the properties for D now, and I'm going to change the speed. I'm going to say if, and then a left square bracket, if point A, the x coordinate of point A, actually since the x coordinate of point A is just the A slider, I could have referenced it that way as well. But if the x coordinate of A is larger than 10, then I want the speed of this slider, so I separate this with a comma, I want the speeder to be 4. The speed of the slider to be 4. Otherwise, essentially if the x coordinate is not bigger than 10, I want the speed to be 0, which means it won't move. And then the right bracket to end that if statement. So I'm just going to hit enter there, and then quit out of that. And now I have to make sure that I go back and set up my button again to turn the animation on for this slider. So I'm going to right click on my animate button, object properties. Now to access the scripting, I'm going to go to the scripting tab and then on click. So when I click on the button, and then I'm going to add to that slider D. Okay. Additionally, for the reset button, I'm going to want D to be set to 0 as well. And click OK. Alright, so let's see what happens when we click animate. Let's slow this one down a little bit. So A is going to be increasing. It's going to hit 10. And then now, the D one is going to turn on. Alright, so here, this is a GeoGebra file I made to model a problem, a math problem where there's two people standing on a beach in the sand, and a ways away from them is a road, and on the road is a taco cart. Made it so you can move the taco cart along the road. I also made it so you can pick where the people start. The two people, one of the guys thinks that it'd be quicker to just go straight to the taco cart through the sand, and the other guy thinks it'd be quickest to go straight to the road and then to the taco cart because you can move quicker on the road. And so the way that I use sliders to model this problem was, first there's two sliders here. I can change how fast they move through the sand. This is the rate that they move through the sand. And then this slider changes the rate at which they move on the road. And so we can set up all sorts of different problems with this. You know, maybe they can't go very fast in the sand, say 0.7, and the road's a lot quicker, say 2.1. And so now if I click start, again I'm using, you know, my start, stop, reset buttons like you saw previously. There's many other sliders that are hidden. I don't want them shown. But just like I showed you before, I had the case where I didn't want another slider animation to start until a certain criterion was met. And so once I hit start, there's a slider that has an if statement that it doesn't turn the speed on until this circle is large enough, and then the slider turns on, and then all of a sudden the road speed kicks in.